Hello, everyone. My name is Bailey,
My name is Nathalia.
and we are going to be presenting on the phylum Rotifera today.
So here's a quick outline of what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be covering the Gnathostomulida and Rotifera with a focus on the Rotifera characteristics and body plan. A little bit of the quick classification. We're going to be speaking the majority of the time about the subclass Acanthocephala, which is part of the class Hemerotatoria, as well as a little bit about the development and reproduction of that specific subclass, Acanthocephala.
The two phylums, Gnathostomulida and Rotifera, are part of the clade Rotifera. They were actually once grouped as a phylum together called Aschelminths, and they were assumed for a long period of time to be sister taxa, but recent evidence showed from molecular studies that Gnathostomulida actually evolved from Rotifera, and that the true sister group of Rotifera is actually Acanthocephala. The phylum Rotifera has over 2,000 species. They are microscopic, free-living animals, and the Latin meaning of Rotifera is wheelbearer. And Rotifera gets its name specifically from an area on their head called corona. And corona is a ciliary organ made up of coronal cilia, which when it's activated, it actually resembles a rotating wheel, which is a defining external characteristic of Rotifera. So here is a quick video on the coronal cilia activated and in motion, and you can see that it resembles a rotating wheel. Moving on to the Rotifera body. The Rotifera actually has a very complex body system despite being microscopic and really small. There are 3 general regions. There is a head, the trunk region, which is the middle, and the foot region. Now, in the head region, you can see that the corona is there, the mouth, and right below where the cerebral ganglion is, where it says mastex, is important because the mastex, inside the mastex, there are internal jaws called trophi, and the trophi is important because it helps identify the species. The Rotifera is also triploblastic, bilateral. It is also blastocoelomate and has a complete gut. It also has a fixed number of nuclei and has a unique retrocerebral organ. Now we're going to discuss more about the Rotifera body and their characteristics. The Rotifera body has a lack of cuticle and a body wall, and so to make up for this, it uses protein lamina and skeletal lamina. And the way that a Rotifera moves is that they either swim or crawl. And to swim, they accomplish this by beating the coronal cilia, which propels them forward. And they crawl by using its foot from the pedal glands to elongate its body and extend forward. They are filter feeders, so they usually feed on small animals, decomposed material, algae, plankton, and they utilize their cilia to trap their prey, and they are also predatory. Some further Rotifera characteristics are that they live in marine, freshwater, or semi-terrestrial environments, meaning some can be found in damp soil or water film on mosses. Most are solitary, but only a few are colonial.
Moving onwards to Rotifera classification. So within the phylum Rotifera, there are actually a couple of classes. However, the one that we focus on mainly is actually going to be the class Hemerotatoria. Within this class, there's actually both free living organisms as well as both endo and ectoparasitic, which means ones that live in and outside of another organism. We actually only know that the grouping of all these organisms together in this class is via molecular data. So via DNA is the only connection between them. Within this class, there's 3 major subclasses, including the Xanthocephala, which is going to be the one that we're focusing on today, the Delodea, as well as the Sesonidia. So we're going to move on to focusing on that subclass, Xanthocephalans. If you look at the image here, we see that the worm has a couple of different body segments, but most importantly, we see up at the head region or the anterior ends, this kind of spiny, funky looking head to the animal. It's actually not a head. It's proboscis. So let's go ahead and break down the word Xanthocephala. A xanthocephala is actually comes from a Greek origin with xanthias, meaning prickly, and cephalo, meaning head, and have the common name of spiny head or prickly head worms. There's roughly around 1,200 different species, and there are so many that they actually had it be that the Xanthocephala were their own phylum originally before they were actually put within the phylum Rotifera. They determined that they were a part of the same phylum via genetic data, and versus having one major structure that looked very similar. However, I think that kind of that the corona of the head of the Rotifera, as well as the spiny head of the worm, do look a little bit similar to me. They actually end up being about 20 to 60 centimeters long, with larger females than males. And we see a kind of interesting development with them, which is similar to other parasitic worms that we've seen. We've seen the internal and loss of a gut. What this means is that while they're triploblastic, they actually don't have an internal digestive tract. Because this is due to a couple of reasons. Main reason is because they use their spiny head to attach onto the inside of the intestines of their host and suck and bathe in that nutrients that's passing through the gut. Again, very similar to other internal intestinal parasitic worms that we've seen previously in this class. Because there are actually so many species within this subclass of the Xanthocephala, they actually have 3 major groups, and the groups are determined mainly based off of the arrangement of the hoods on the proboscis. And the best way that I can suggest everyone tell these as different organisms than the other mini worms that we've seen in class is based off the fact that they do have that spiny head proboscis that they can eject. So if we go ahead and we look at the images on these slides, you can see, wow, the proboscis isn't as glaring and doesn't stick out as much as the previous slide where we had that big spiny kind of head region. They are actually able to invaginate their proboscis, which means pull it inside, similar to that video that you saw previously of the Rotifera, where they were able to pull their coronas into acting like a mouth to grab into. However, because the Xanthocephala don't actually eat anything through their mouth, they don't use it for that function, but that is the main defining characteristic of them against other worms. So this slide shows the life cycle of an Xanthocephala, and as we can see, it has a similar life cycle to a lot of parasitic worms, where it's born in fecal matter as eggs, and then is passed along to an intermediate host, which is an arthropod in this case, goes through a couple of life cycles within that intermediate host until it is consumed, and then it lives out the rest of its life within the small intestine of definite host. There, it uses its spiny proboscis to attach to the inside of the intestines to bathe in those juices and have a lot of sex and reproduce. So moving on to our questions. The blank blank at the anterior end of the Xanthocephalans differentiate them from other worms. The correct answer to that is going to be a spiny proboscis.
And our second question is, what is a defining characteristic of the Rotifera? And that will be the corona, because it's what makes the Rotifera resemble a rotating wheel.
That has been our presentation on the phylum Rotifera. Thanks so much for watching, and we look forward to watching everybody else's.